Welcome to the All American Book Club. For all of those who are tuning in here at News Talk 105.9 FM in our nation's capital, we are all about devotion to our veterans, to our military families. I am a veteran spouse, and we absolutely celebrate Veterans Day 365 here at the All American Book Club, not just one day a year. And we have a very special guest coming over to the show. We have Richard Hull joining us this morning. He's going to be talking about Fighting Spirit, a combat chaplain's journey. And he is the co-director, writer, and producer for Fighting Spirit, a combat chaplain's journey. So, Richard, thank you so much for being here this morning. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being a veteran spouse.
My pleasure. It's an honor. I tell you what, I wear the token very proudly, and our family is a legacy of military service to this nation. And being in our nation's capital, and also being here in Eastern North Carolina, where my husband retired out of Fort Bragg, it is so important for us to make sure, as I said, that we recognize them 365, not just one day a year. So I'm excited for you to talk about the Chap Corps. We love our chaplains. And I love that you are bringing this to the theaters. So if you could share with us your journey on bringing this to the theaters first and foremost.
Well, you're right. It is a journey. And, that word is in the title of the movie. I think we all go on a journey, whether you're part of the audience or making the movie, or you're part of the story, one of the stories that we told in the movie. For me, it's been a 4-year journey, kind of a labor of love. I think this is my 28th movie as a producer, but it's my very first as a director. And so I was brought into the movie because my friends at Paulus Productions, which is a Los Angeles-based production company. It's a nonprofit. It was started 60 years ago by a Catholic priest. And they wanted to make a movie about military chaplains. And I had made years ago a documentary about Black soldiers that had fought in all the U.S. wars we ever had in conjunction with the Army. Halle Berry and I won the NAACP Image Award for that year, and some other awards. And so I think they brought me in because they thought that I might have some trust with the military, and that probably turned out to be true. And so you want the military involved in something like this if you want to interview, active duty military folks in uniform and shoot on military bases and dig into their very extensive archives. And so they came on board. I started learning about the subject matter and just really fell in love with it. I'm not a veteran. My dad is a veteran. My family members are veterans, but I'm not one. And so as I learned about this, it was a peek into the world that I didn't even know existed. And I thought, why would these people go to combat wearing a uniform but not carry a weapon? It's a real head scratcher. You got to really think about why someone would do that. It's not a job you do for a paycheck. And so as I dug into that, I had been aware of another combat chaplain story. It was a guy named Jeff Struecker who had been portrayed in the movie Black Hawk Down. He was a former Army Ranger who became a combat chaplain. And we reached out to him. He agreed to become involved and let us tell his story in a very unique way. The Army Chaplain Corps came on board. Chris Pratt came on board. Everybody just kept saying yes and yes and yes. It created this groundswell. And here we are 4 years later, and it's somewhat coming to an end when the movie comes out this weekend for Veterans Day in theaters.
So I don't want it to come to an end. We need to keep this going. And when I saw that it was going to be in the theaters on November the 8th, is that correct? Did I get that date right? And I wanted to share it far and wide with everybody. And I'm like, can we keep that in the theaters longer? Because as I said, this country honors all these different topics, and even Ice Cream Day, and they all get these special days. But, the veterans' selfless service, sacrifice, it gets so passed over a lot. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm excited for this to come out. And I want to figure out a way where, my question to you is, are you guys sharing this around the nation at the USOs and the veteran service organizations? Where is that collaboration piece coming in?
Well, you're right. I want it to last all year as well. Generally veterans kind of get the spotlight on Memorial Day in May and Veterans Day in November, but it would be really great if that lasted 12 months out of the year. And there's a way to do that, quite frankly, which is when you go to the theater, you are telling the theater owners that these are the types of stories you want to see and that you're willing to pay money to buy a ticket for. And so, I guess we're in a presidential election week, so I guess I can use the word vote. You're sort of voting when you
Yeah.
go and buy a ticket. And
Yeah.
right now, a lot of people go to movie theaters to see superhero movies and animated family movies and maybe a horror movie every now and then. But
Yeah.
to go and support a movie like this tells the theater owners that you want more and they will bring you more. They are in the business of making money. And so it is a way for you to kind of vote, but also extend that spotlight far, bigger throughout the year than just those two particular days.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the movie itself. I remember one of my favorite historical stories is the Four Chaplains. And as soon as I heard that this was coming out, I'm like, oh, I love when people celebrate the Four Chaplains Day, right? And so talk to us about, I love how you brought the stories together. You brought modern day veteran army or chaplain who was struggling, and you and I both know, and our audience knows, what 22 a day, 23 a day go to suicide or have survivor's guilt. And so this modern day chaplain that you talk about, and then it's like he's struggling to find his purpose after leaving service. Talk to me about that part of the story, and then what gets him into that next phase and how this all came together.
Yeah, well, I too love the Fort Chaplain story.
Yeah.
It's probably one that people know if you've been in the military,
Right.
but it's really the only one that I think people know. And the reason we decided to tell it is we found this old piece of footage from Frank Sinatra talking about the Four Chaplains, and we thought, oh, what an interesting way to get into this story in a fresh way. But then you're right, we weave that together with some other historical stories, but also some modern day stories. And so, as you pointed out, Justin Roberts, he's one of my partners on the film. He co-directed the movie. He's a veteran. He is a former Army combat chaplain. And having him involved was really important to us because I wanted everything to be viewed through a veteran lens so that it would really have complete authenticity. And so Justin had come back from the military. He was at his home in Lake Charles, Louisiana, I think really struggling to figure out what the next chapter of his life was going to look like. And we were about halfway done with production, and we heard about this former Army combat chaplain who had died 70 years earlier in a prisoner of war camp in Korea. He was a Catholic priest. His name was Father Emil Kapaun. And they identified his remains and said that they were going to bring them back to his hometown of Wichita, Kansas, and have a proper burial and funeral. And so we decided to put Justin on the road, send him to the funeral with a camera crew, and shoot it. And we didn't quite know if that would even fit into our work, but we just thought maybe it would. When you start a documentary, you make a plan, and the only thing you know for sure is that
Yeah.
the plan's going to be wrong. And so, uh, and the movie was struggling to find its voice at that moment. And so when Justin went, I think he thought that nobody would show up. But if you know anything about the military and the Catholic Church, they know how to put on a pretty good show. And so
They
when he
do.
arrived there, it was not only a celebration of Father Capon, but a celebration of all combat chaplains. And I think it became a really pivotal moment in Justin's own journey that really changed the direction of his life, gave him confidence to do what he wanted to do. And then he became the tour guide in the movie as we wove his story and his journey and Father Capon's story together with some of the other stories that we intended to tell. Justin kind of became a tour guide for the audience into these other chaplains' journeys who had inspired him. And I think that's really where the movie found its heartbeat and kind of the magic. And as I go around the country and the world screening it for, groups, as you mentioned earlier, in
Yeah.
advance, I see the reactions that people are having. And we actually started that advanced screening tour in Rome at the Vatican. The Pope invited us to come and screen the movie in the screening room at his house. Like, who knew that the Pope had a screening room in his house? And
You do.
who knew? It was built in 900 AD. It's an old chapel. And, walking through the Swiss Guard, going into the Pope's inner compound, I mean, it's just, you feel the weight of everything. But screening it for groups since then, I just see the power that the movie has. And I think it comes from weaving all of those stories together. Obviously, I'm biased in this, but I think military audiences find a certain connection to it. I think faith-based audiences find a very unique connection to it because it really is the opportunity to really live your faith because you're
Yes.
out there as a combat chaplain on the front lines. And while you may come from a particular faith, you're dealing with soldiers of all faiths and no faiths. And you're dealing with some very powerful life and death issues. And you mentioned suicide as one of them. I mean,
Yes.
chaplains are the group that are tackling that in the military and they're making progress.
Mhm.
And so these are very heavy questions that they're dealing with. And it's a very unique example of living your faith. But even
Mm.
general population audiences I'm seeing are really loving it because it's this peek into this world that they didn't even know existed. And it's so
Mhm.
fascinating. And especially for military audiences, when they see it, I think it starts with a little bit of a recollection for them of what their service was like, because I know that every veteran I talk to has got a story about a chaplain. I mean, it may be a small moment where the chaplain had some minor influence on their life, or it may be a big moment where the chaplain saved their life, but
Yeah.
they've all got one. And
Mhm.
so I think it kind of helps them recollect that. But then by the end of the movie, it's like the lights come up in the theater and it's tears of joy because everyone seems to say to me, who is a veteran, this has given voice to my experience in the military in a way that I probably couldn't have. And it helps me explain to my family and my friends and my community what
Mhm.
that journey was like for me. And so it's really been a incredibly gratifying experience for me as a storyteller and a filmmaker to just go screen for these groups leading up to this weekend's release in theaters. And it's only in theaters. And we did that on purpose because we wanted people to come together to celebrate Veterans Day with their community. It's also a few days after the presidential election. We could probably
Yes.
all use a little healing, you know. So coming into the theater as a community, maybe even with people you don't necessarily agree on everything with, but like this is a place that everyone can find common ground. Who can't agree on the incredible and heroic role of combat chaplains in our military?
Well, you nailed it. It's a unifier. It brings communities together. We live in a military community here in Eastern North Carolina. So we're surrounded by Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, F-15s. We're surrounded by Fort Bragg Army. We are surrounded by the Marine Corps, 2nd Combat Marine Logistics Unit, and then also the Coast Guard. So we have them all here. And so we have found that the veterans who are stationed here, they retire here. And the community, it's unique how the community comes together, and it is one to support one another. So you don't look at any of the political dysfunction happening in the nation, but you come together, and there is that thirst for Americana. There's that thirst to celebrate. There's that thirst to remember, honor, remember, and service. And I love how I saw that. You captured that perfectly for me when I watched the YouTube clip and just being able to look at the press kit. You brought that to life for me personally. And I also want to thank you because you look at all the different military flicks that are on TV, and it's good for, as you said, it's good for our military service members and those who are veterans. As I'm pointing because my husband's in the other room watching a military veteran or a veteran movie, and it takes them back to what the service meant for them, and it brings them back alive. And I've noticed that, for an example, and I'm just affirming what you guys are doing. We went to Fort Bragg to the Special Operations Museum founded by John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy. And the director said when they would have reunions, they would come in with their spouses and their kids. And their spouses would then say later, that's the first time I saw my husband come fully alive,
Hmm.
because they were again back together.
That's so fascinating and interesting and true and powerful
Mhm.
and I think, for me as a non-veteran, I think of, what you're talking about is
Mhm.
how it helps veterans to share stories like this, whether it be in a museum, as you mentioned, or in a movie like this. I really do think that it does make them whole in a certain way.
Mhm.
And but for a non-veteran like me,
Yeah.
there's also a call to action in the movie, which is especially as we go into Veterans Day,
Mhm.
the chaplains live their life believing that one person can make a difference. I mean,
Mhm.
that's really the ethos of what a chaplain does. And even in the movie, we say, one of the chaplains says, sometimes we as chaplains don't know what to do. And so we just are present
Mhm.
and we're present for the soldiers. And that's a powerful moment for them. And so as a non-veteran, I think, okay, well, what's my call to action from the movie? And it's to reach out to a veteran, especially on Veterans Day, tell them what their service means to you. Ask them if they're okay. See
Mhm.
how they're doing. Check in. Go get a beer.
Yeah,
Whether it be your
exactly.
family member, your friend,
Exactly.
there's so many opportunities for one person to make a difference. And I think that's really the message of what the movie is, but also just what chaplains do. And remember, chaplains don't like telling their story. That was one of the biggest
Mm.
challenges in the
Yes.
movie. They don't like to be part of the story. They're there to serve the soldiers who were there serving us as Americans, and that's where they think the spotlight should be on the soldiers. So it was hard to drag these stories out of the chaplains, and so I think part of that is just that they know one person can make a difference, and that's really what I hope people are inspired to do when they
Mhm.
see the movie this Veterans Day.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to talk to you briefly about the Chris Pratt and his role because I know military service is in his background as well, having seen the movie The Terminal and just knowing that I believe his brother served or is serving. And how did that all come to be? Was it because of the military, personal military stories for him? Is that what drew him to this as well?
Well, I've been doing this for a while
Yeah,
and know a few people in Hollywood. And
yeah,
my producing partner, Daniel Snyder, and he too has been doing it for quite a while. And
yeah.
so we reached out to Chris, and I think for Chris, this really checks a lot of boxes. As you
Mm,
pointed out, he's a big military supporter.
yeah.
He's very vocal about that. He's a very faith forward guy. I think he's a great storyteller. He just loves telling good stories, especially for the first time ever. And so there's a lot of boxes that this checks
Right,
for Chris.
right.
But he's also a guy that, really has created a lot of value for us because he has a very big voice. I mean, he's a guy with 50 million Instagram followers, not to
Yeah.
mention one of the biggest movie stars in the world. And so for him to sign on to this brings a spotlight to the film that it probably wouldn't otherwise get.
Mhm.
And it allows me to come on to shows like yours and
Yeah.
talk to people about it and allows you to tell your audience about it. And I think that's really important.
Mhm.
Like I might argue that we've made a superhero movie here, but we don't have a superhero movie marketing budget. And so people like Chris coming on board have really just amplified it. And I think that's just
Mhm.
really special. So I'm incredibly grateful to Chris for his partnership, and he's just really done a great job.
Mhm. When in the final segment are here at the All American Book Club, I'd love to ask you, do you see on the horizon? I've met amazing creative people like yourself who did not serve, and they write books for children on military service, on military children on the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier are very well known. It's very similar to your journey in the sense that you wanted to tell these stories, but yet you had not served. Do you see in your future more of the God Country family segment coming out from your work? And do you have other dreams and aspirations? Oh, I just heard that veteran story. I've got to tell that. Do you see that on the horizon for you?
Well, I could spend about 2 hours talking about all the stories I want to tell in the
Okay, let's do
future.
it.
But I think one of the great things about the Army Chaplain Corps and my partnership with them is that I've learned so many stories
Mhm.
that nobody knows. And we just didn't have time to put them into the movie. So it surely wouldn't surprise me to see us doing more like
Mhm.
this, or to choose one of those stories and turn it into perhaps a scripted movie. I think that there's a lot of really great material and stories that deserve to be told about veterans and about chaplains, and um, you just might see one or two coming out in the future from me. We'll see.
Well, I mean, between our nation's capital and also being so close to Fort Bragg, if you are ever in the area and are looking, for additional meetings and collaborations and introductions, I mean, please let us know. I mean, it is just, you have inspired and you're going to continue inspiring, because I think about the future generations who didn't live through 9/11, the future generations who will never even understand what the greatest generation stands for. And you are now impacting them to say, okay, I'm going to put down my phone and get off TikTok and actually want to serve. I want to serve this nation. So you're doing that as well. You're impacting them. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. But I agree. I think there's an opportunity for all of us to serve in
Yeah.
whatever way is appropriate for us. I would surely not be a good partner with the U.S. Army Chaplain Corps if I didn't also mention that the Chaplain Corps needs chaplains in every branch of the military. And, you can go to the goarmy.com website and navigate to the Chaplain Corps and figure out how to become a chaplain. And one of the things I think is so interesting, as I mentioned earlier, every veteran I know has got a chaplain story.
Oh, yes. Oh,
But
yes.
what if that wasn't the case? Like, I don't want it to be 10 years in the future and only 50% of veterans have a chaplain story. I want them all to still have a chaplain story. And the only way that that happens is by people committing their life to this service. And so I think that's a real opportunity to serve as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, you cited something that I can bring up here at the All American Book Club, and our audience will already know, because I beat that drum a lot, but we've seen the lowest recruitment levels since before World War II. And so you citing that the Army Chaplain Corps is needing more chaplains, it nails it. It basically hit that point, right, that nail right on the head. So I'm glad you brought that up. We need to be more aware of that, and to still instill God, country, and family within our military service, our military families, but also this veteran community. I'm so thankful for what you've done. On a final note here, final word with Richard Hall, I would love for you to share, okay, what cities can we go see this amazing movie, and what would be a final word for you to our veterans?
Well, it's in the 20 major markets throughout the
Okay.
US.
Okay.
You can find out the theater near you by going to fightingspiritfilm.com. So it's
Okay.
fightingspiritfilm.com. And there's a little button at the top that says get tickets, and you can type in your zip code and it'll show you a theater near you.
Got it right here. Okay, perfect.
Perfect. And so that's a great thing to do. And then I think, for me, I'm just grateful for the veterans who served, who fought for our freedoms, who keep us safe. I think I have a real newfound appreciation
Mhm.
for what they went through and through this movie. And I think someone in the film, a chaplain in the film says, when you go to war, it is always going to leave scars on your soul, no matter who you are. And when you come back from military service, you're going to be a different person. Now, you can be a better person, but you're
Mhm.
going to be different. And for some reason, that phrase just really stuck with me, scars on your soul and being a better person. And so I have a real newfound appreciation for it. And so I would just sign off by saying thank you to all the veterans.
Well, Richard Hall, I'm so honored to know you. And as the team, Ashley and all of them know, you're welcome back anytime. I love if you came back and talked about other projects you're working on, but this is such a powerful project. And I look forward to sharing it with our audience, and look forward to just supporting you and greater endeavors and this amazing endeavor for our veterans and the Chaplain Corps. So thank you.
Thank you so much.